The woman stumbled into Chico, California on a blistering August afternoon in 1876, her dress torn and dusty, her fingers wrapped around a photograph so burned and blackened that nobody could make out what it once showed, and she held it against her chest, like it was the only thing keeping her heart beating. Malcolm Anders had been shoeing a horse outside the livery stable when he first saw her collapse against the water trough near the general store. He dropped his tools without a second thought and crossed the dirt street in long strides, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The woman was younger than he had first thought, maybe 23 or 24, with dark auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and eyes the color of storm clouds over the Sierra Nevada. "Madam," he said, keeping his voice gentle as he approached, "you need water." She looked up at him with those gray eyes, and he saw something in them that made his chest tighten. Not just exhaustion or fear, but a bone-deep sorrow that seemed to have taken up permanent residence in her soul. Her fingers remained clutched around that burned photograph, and even as she nodded and accepted the dipper of water he offered, she never let go of it. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. Malcolm was 26 years old, and in his years working as both a ranch hand and now helping out at the livery, he had seen plenty of people passing through Chico. Some were heading north to the mines, others were fleeing something, and a few were just lost. This woman, he thought, was all three at once. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked, crouching down so he was not towering over her. She shook her head slowly, still drinking the water in small, careful sips. Up close, he could see the dirt streaked across her face, the way her hands trembled slightly, and the fierce determination in the set of her jaw. Whatever had happened to her, she was a survivor. "My name is Malcolm," he said. "Malcolm Anders. This here is Chico, and while we are not the biggest town, we are decent folk for the most part. There is a boarding house on 2nd Street that takes in women travelers. Mrs. Peterson runs it, and she is good people." "Martha," the woman said finally. "Martha Ewing." She did not offer any more information than that, and Malcolm noticed the way her knuckles had gone white around that photograph. He wanted to ask about it, wanted to know what could make a person hold onto something so damaged with such desperate intensity, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, or maybe it was the instinct that told him this woman had already been asked too many questions by the wrong people. "Well, Miss Ewing, let me help you up to Mrs. Peterson's place. You look like you could use a proper meal and a bed." Martha let him help her to her feet, though she swayed slightly once she was standing. Malcolm offered his arm, and after a moment of hesitation, she took it. They walked slowly down the main street, past the saloon where piano music drifted out into the hot afternoon, past the doctor's office and the bank, until they reached the neat white boarding house with its green shutters and flower boxes. Mrs. Peterson took one look at Martha and ushered her inside with the efficiency of a woman who had seen her share of lost souls. Malcolm tipped his hat and turned to leave, but Martha's voice stopped him. "Mr. Anders," she said, and when he turned back, she was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Thank you for your kindness, for not asking questions." He nodded slowly. "Everyone has their own story, Miss Ewing. You will tell it when you are ready, or maybe you would not. Either way is fine by me." That was the first day, and it set the pattern for all the days that followed. Martha stayed in Chico. She took a job helping Mrs. Peterson with the boarding house, earning her keep by cooking and cleaning and tending to the other guests. Malcolm saw her around town often, always with that burned photograph tucked into her pocket or held in her hand. Sometimes he would catch her sitting on the boarding house porch in the evening, staring at that ruined image as if she could will it back into clarity through sheer force of longing. He never asked about it. Instead, he found other reasons to talk to her. He would stop by the boarding house to deliver firewood, even though Mrs. Peterson already had a supplier. He would happen to be walking past when Martha was struggling with heavy laundry baskets, and he would offer to carry them. He would save her a seat at the town's social gatherings, the dances and church picnics that punctuated life in Chico. Martha was cautious at first, keeping him at a polite distance, but gradually she began to soften. She would smile when she saw him coming, a real smile that reached her eyes and made something warm bloom in his chest. She would laugh at his stories about ornery horses and difficult customers at the livery. She would let him walk her home in the evenings, and they would talk about everything except the one thing she clutched in her hand. September gave way to October, and the heat began to ease. The leaves on the trees turned gold and red, and the harvest came in from the surrounding farms. Malcolm found himself thinking about Martha constantly, about the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, about the sound of her laugh, about the sadness that still lived in her eyes but seemed to be fading slowly, like morning mist burning off under the sun. One evening in late October, they were sitting together on the porch of the boarding house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Martha had that photograph in her hands again. She was running her thumb over its burned surface, lost in thought. Malcolm watched her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to, but I want you to know that I am here if you ever need someone to listen." Martha looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Why?" she asked. "Why have you been so kind to me? You do not know anything about me, about where I came from or what I have done." "I know enough," Malcolm said firmly. "I know that you are strong and brave. I know that you work hard and treat people with kindness. I know that you have been hurt, but you are still here, still trying. That is all I need to know." A tear slipped down Martha's cheek, and she brushed it away quickly. "I came from Sacramento," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was engaged to be married. His name was Thomas, and he was everything I thought I wanted, charming and handsome and from a good family." Malcolm stayed quiet, sensing that she needed to get this out. "But he was not who I thought he was," Martha continued, her voice shaking slightly. "After we were engaged, he changed. He became controlling, jealous. He did not want me to see my friends or my family. He would get angry over the smallest things. I tried to break off the engagement, but he would not accept it. He said I belonged to him now, that I had made a promise." She clutched the burned photograph tighter, her knuckles going white again. "One night, about 3 months ago, I told him I was leaving no matter what he said. He got so angry. He grabbed me and we fought, and a lamp got knocked over. The house caught fire so fast. I managed to get out, but Thomas—" She swallowed hard. "He did not make it out. The whole house burned down. Everyone said it was my fault, that I had killed him. His family, his friends, they all blamed me. They said I should hang for what I did." Malcolm felt a surge of protective anger on her behalf, but he kept his voice calm. "Was it your fault?" "I do not know," Martha whispered. "I was trying to get away from him, and the lamp fell, and everything just happened so fast. Sometimes I think if I had just stayed, if I had just done what he wanted, he would still be alive. Other times I remember the bruises he left on my arms, the way he would corner me and yell until I was shaking, and I think I did what I had to do to survive." "You did," Malcolm said firmly. "You did what you had to do, and what happened after was an accident, not your fault." Martha looked down at the photograph in her hands. "This was a picture of my family," she said softly. "My mother and father and my little sister. It was in the house when the fire started, and I ran back in to get it because I could not bear to lose them too. But by the time I grabbed it, it was already burning. This is all I have left of them. They are in Sacramento and they think I am a murderer. They will not see me or speak to me. I had to run before Thomas's family could have me arrested, so I just started walking, and I ended up here." Malcolm reached over slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and covered her hand with his. "You are safe here," he said. "I would not let anyone hurt you, Martha. I promise you that." She looked up at him, searching his face for something, and whatever she found there made her shoulders relax slightly. "Why do you care?" she asked again, but this time her voice was softer, almost wondering. "Because I have come to care about you," Malcolm said honestly. "More than I probably should, given that we have only known each other a couple of months. But I cannot help it. You make me want to be better, to do better. When I see you smile, it feels like the sun coming out. And when I see you sad, I want to fix whatever is wrong. I know you have been through hell, and I know you are carrying a lot of pain. But I see you, Martha. Not what happened to you, but who you are. And I think you are extraordinary." Martha stared at him, and then, slowly, she set the burned photograph down on the porch railing and reached for his other hand. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid that if anyone knew the truth, they would hate me. They would see me as a monster." "I could never see you that way," Malcolm said. "Never." She leaned forward then, resting her forehead against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her carefully, like she was something precious and fragile. They sat like that as the sun finished setting and the stars began to come out, and Malcolm felt something shift between them, something profound and unbreakable. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Malcolm's life. Martha began to truly settle into life in Chico, and the shadows in her eyes grew lighter with each passing day. She still carried that photograph with her, but she did not clutch it with the same desperate intensity anymore. Instead, it became something she would take out occasionally, looking at it with sadness but also acceptance, as if she was learning to let go of the past without forgetting it entirely. Malcolm courted her properly, with all the respect and patience she deserved. He brought her wildflowers picked from the hills outside town. He took her on picnics by the creek, where they would sit on a blanket and talk for hours about everything and nothing. He taught her how to ride a horse, laughing as she wobbled in the saddle at first but cheering when she finally got the hang of it and went galloping across the field with joy on her face. In November, the first real cold snap came through, and Malcolm showed up at the boarding house with a new wool shawl he had bought from the general store. "To keep you warm," he said, wrapping it around her shoulders. Martha touched the soft fabric, then looked up at him with such tenderness that it made his heart skip. "You are always taking care of me," she said. "I want to," Malcolm replied simply, "for as long as you will let me." By December, the whole town knew they were courting, and the general consensus was that Malcolm Anders had finally found himself a good woman. Mrs. Peterson was particularly pleased, as she had taken a strong liking to Martha and approved of Malcolm's intentions. She started making pointed comments about spring weddings and how lovely the church looked with flowers on Christmas Eve. There was a dance in the town hall. Malcolm wore his best clothes and called for Martha at the boarding house, and when she came down the stairs in a dress Mrs. Peterson had helped her make from deep green fabric, he thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They danced together most of the evening, moving through waltzes and reels, and Malcolm was acutely aware of her hand in his, the warmth of her waist under his palm, the way she looked up at him with trust and something deeper, something that made his breath catch. When the evening was winding down and they were walking back to the boarding house under a sky full of stars, Malcolm stopped in the middle of the street and turned to face her. "Martha," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. I know we have not been courting for very long, but I also know that I have never felt this way about anyone before. You have become the most important person in my life. When I wake up in the morning, you are my first thought. When I go to sleep at night, I am thinking about you. I want to spend every day making you happy, protecting you, loving you the way you deserve to be loved. Martha's eyes were wide, her breath coming in small white puffs in the cold air. I am not asking you to answer right now, Malcolm continued. I know you need time and I want you to be sure. But I am asking you to think about whether you might want to build a life with me, a real life, here in Chico where we can both be happy. Martha reached up and cupped his face with her hands, her palms cold against his cheeks. Malcolm, she said, and her voice was thick with tears. I never thought I would feel safe enough to love someone again. After Thomas, after everything that happened, I thought that part of me was broken forever. But you have shown me that it was not. You have been patient and kind and good, and you have never once made me feel afraid. I do not need time to think about it. I already know my answer. Malcolm's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. And what is your answer? Yes, Martha said, smiling through her tears. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes, I want to marry you and wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. Yes to all of it, Malcolm. Yes. He kissed her then, right there in the middle of the street, with the stars shining above them and the cold December wind swirling around them, and it felt like coming home. They were married in February of 1877, on a crisp Sunday morning when the sky was clear and blue. The church was full of people from the town who had come to celebrate with them, and Martha wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Peterson had helped her sew. She carried a bouquet of winter berries and evergreen branches, and when Malcolm saw her walking down the aisle toward him, he had to blink back tears. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Malcolm kissed his bride with all the love and promise he had been holding in his heart. The congregation cheered, and Martha laughed, and Malcolm thought that this moment right here was the best moment of his entire life. They had rented a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy but sturdy and clean with a little garden plot out back. Malcolm had spent weeks fixing it up, repairing the porch steps and replacing broken windows and making sure everything was perfect for Martha. They spent their wedding night there, and Malcolm was gentle and patient, mindful of the trauma Martha carried. She cried a little, overwhelmed by the difference between this and what she had experienced before, and Malcolm held her and whispered that they had all the time in the world, that there was no rush, that he would always put her comfort and happiness first. Life as a married couple fell into a comfortable rhythm. Malcolm continued working at the livery stable, and Martha took in sewing and laundry to bring in extra money. They saved carefully, dreaming of the day when they might buy their own ranch, a place where they could raise horses and maybe cattle, where they could build something lasting together. In the evenings, they would sit together on their porch, watching the sun set over the fields. Sometimes, Martha would take out that burned photograph, and Malcolm would put his arm around her and let her talk about her family if she wanted to, or just sit in companionable silence if she did not. He never pushed, never demanded explanations or details. He simply accepted her, all of her, including the parts that were still healing. One warm evening in May, Martha was quieter than usual. Malcolm noticed the way she kept fidgeting with her skirt, the way she would start to say something and then stop. Finally, he set down the piece of harness he had been mending and turned to her. "What is it?" he asked gently. "You have been working yourself up to tell me something all evening." Martha bit her lip, then looked up at him with nervous excitement in her eyes. "I am with child," she said softly. I went to see Dr. Harrison this morning, and he confirmed it. We are going to have a baby, Malcolm." For a moment, Malcolm could not speak. Joy flooded through him so intensely that it left him breathless. Then he let out a whoop of delight and scooped Martha up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and told him to be careful. "A baby," he said, setting her down gently and cupping her face in his hands. "We are going to have a baby. Oh, Martha, you have made me the happiest man alive." "You are not upset?" she asked, a hint of worry in her voice. "I know we were hoping to save more money first, and the house is small and—" "Upset?" Malcolm interrupted. "How could I possibly be upset? This is the best news I have ever heard. We will manage the money, and the house is plenty big enough for now, and we are going to be parents, Martha. You and me, we are going to have a family." Martha's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. "I was afraid," she admitted. "After everything that happened in Sacramento, I was afraid I would not be a good mother. I was afraid the baby would somehow be marked by my past." "That is not how it works," Malcolm said firmly. "This baby is going to be made of love, our love. And you are going to be an amazing mother, I know it. You are strong and caring and brave, and our child is going to be so lucky to have you." The months of Martha's pregnancy were filled with preparation and anticipation. Malcolm built a cradle out of oak wood, sanding it smooth and carving little horses into the headboard. Martha sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving with practiced skill. Mrs. Peterson and the other women in town threw a party for Martha, bringing gifts and advice and stories of their own children. As Martha's belly grew round and full, Malcolm found himself falling even more in love with her. He loved the way she would place his hand on her stomach so he could feel the baby kick. He loved the glow in her cheeks and the way she would hum while cooking. He loved knowing that they had created this new life together, that they were building the family they both wanted so desperately. In January of 1878, on a cold night when frost covered the windows, Martha went into labor. Malcolm rode through the dark streets to fetch Dr. Harrison and Mrs. Peterson, then paced the kitchen while Martha labored in their bedroom. He could hear her crying out, and it tore at him, but Mrs. Peterson kept shooing him away whenever he tried to go in. Finally, just before dawn, he heard a new sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. His heart leaped into his throat, and he was halfway to the bedroom door when Mrs. Peterson emerged, beaming. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy with a good set of lungs on him." Malcolm pushed past her into the bedroom, where Martha was lying back against the pillows, exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets, and when Malcolm came closer, he saw a wrinkled red face and a shock of dark hair. "Our son," Martha said softly, looking up at Malcolm with so much love it almost hurt. "Do you want to hold him?" Malcolm nodded, not trusting his voice, and Martha carefully transferred the baby into his arms. The child was so small, so light, and Malcolm felt a fierce surge of protectiveness unlike anything he had ever experienced. This was his son. His and Martha's. A new life, unmarred by the past, full of infinite possibility. "What should we name him?" Martha asked. Malcolm looked down at the baby, then at Martha. "What about Daniel? Daniel Martin Anders." Martha smiled. "Daniel, I like that. Daniel Martin Anders." Little Daniel was a good baby, sleeping in manageable stretches and nursing well. Malcolm threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else, changing diapers and walking the floor with Daniel when he fussed at night so Martha could rest. He would sit by the cradle for hours, just watching his son sleep, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, the way Daniel would make little sounds in his sleep. As Daniel grew from a newborn into an infant and then a toddler, the little house filled with joy and laughter. Malcolm saved every penny he could, still dreaming of that ranch. And in the spring of 1880, his dream finally became a reality. A rancher north of Chico was looking to sell his property and move back east to be with his daughter. And after months of negotiations, Malcolm and Martha scraped together enough money to make the purchase. The ranch was a modest spread, about 200 acres with a decent house, a barn, and several outbuildings. It needed work, but Malcolm was not afraid of hard labor, and Martha was eager to make it a real home. They moved in May, with 2-year-old Daniel toddling around and getting into everything while they unpacked and cleaned and repaired. Malcolm started building up a herd of horses, breeding and training them to sell to ranchers and the cavalry. He had a good eye for horseflesh and a gentle hand, and word spread quickly that Malcolm Anders was someone you went to if you wanted a quality mount. Martha planted a large garden and kept chickens, and she started taking in sewing work from the wives of the other ranchers. Life on the ranch was hard but satisfying. They woke before dawn to tend to the animals, worked through the day, and fell into bed exhausted but content. Daniel grew into a lively, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, wanting to help with everything. Malcolm taught him how to feed the horses and collect eggs from the chickens, and Daniel soaked up every lesson with eager enthusiasm. In 1881, Martha became pregnant again. This time, she was less nervous and more simply excited. She and Malcolm would lie in bed at night, talking about names and wondering whether they would have a boy or a girl, imagining what their family would look like with 2 children. Their daughter was born in November of that year, arriving quickly and with far less drama than Daniel's birth had involved. She was small and perfect, with Martha's gray eyes and a calm disposition that was immediately apparent. They named her Alina Rose Anders, and Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to pat her gently and bring her his toys. The years rolled by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. In 1883, they had another son, whom they named James. In 1885, a daughter named Catherine arrived. The house that had once seemed too small now rang with the sound of children's voices and laughter, and Malcolm and Martha fell into bed each night exhausted but deeply grateful for the life they had built. Martha kept that burned photograph, but it no longer held the same painful grip on her heart. She kept it in a small wooden box on her dresser, and sometimes she would take it out and look at it, but it was more like visiting an old memory than clinging to a lifeline. She had written to her family several times over the years, sending letters to Sacramento in hopes of reconciliation. She never received a response, and while that hurt, she had made peace with it. Her family now was Malcolm and their children, and that was enough. Malcolm watched his wife blossom over the years. The haunted look that had been in her eyes when he first met her had disappeared entirely, replaced by contentment and joy. She was confident and strong, beloved by their children and respected in the community. She no longer flinched when people raised their voices, no longer froze when someone approached her quickly. The wounds Thomas had left on her soul had healed, leaving scars but not defining her. On their 10th wedding anniversary in February of 1887, Malcolm surprised Martha by taking her into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant, leaving the children with Mrs. Peterson for the evening. It was a rare luxury to have time alone together, and they savored every moment of it. Over dessert, Malcolm reached across the table and took Martha's hand. "Do you remember when you first came to Chico?" he asked. "How you were holding that photograph like it was the only thing keeping you alive?" Martha nodded, her expression softening with memory. "I remember. I was so lost then, so broken. I did not think I would ever feel whole again. You never asked me why I did not push you to explain, Malcolm said. Why I never demanded to know your story right away. I did wonder, Martha admitted, but I was so grateful that you did not. I was not ready to talk about it, and you seemed to understand that without me having to say anything. Malcolm smiled. My father used to say that everyone carries burdens, and the kindest thing you can do is not add to them. When I saw you that first day, I saw someone who was already carrying too much. I figured whatever your story was, you would tell me when you were ready, and if you never told me, that would be okay too. I just wanted to help, to make things a little easier if I could. You did more than make things easier, Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. You saved my life, Malcolm, not just by helping me that first day, but by being patient and kind and showing me that not all men are like Thomas. You gave me back my ability to trust, to love, to hope. You gave me this beautiful family and this wonderful life. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God for you every single day. Malcolm brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. You deserve every good thing in the world, Martha Anders, every single good thing. That night, walking home under a sky full of stars, Martha stopped and turned to Malcolm. I want to let it go, she said quietly. Let what go? The photograph, the past, all of it. Martha reached into her pocket and pulled out the burned photograph she still carried. I have been holding on to this for so long, telling myself it was all I had left of my family. But that is not true. I have a family. I have you and Daniel and Alina and James and Catherine. I have Mrs. Peterson and the friends I have made here. I have a life that I love, and I do not want to keep carrying this pain around anymore. Malcolm watched as Martha walked over to a small creek that ran near their property. She stood there for a moment, looking down at the photograph in her hands, and then she gently placed it in the water. They watched together as the current caught it and carried it away, the burned paper dissolving slowly until it disappeared entirely. Goodbye, Martha whispered. I hope you are at peace wherever you are. I hope my family can forgive me someday, but I need to move forward now. I need to live fully in this life I have been given. Malcolm wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood there in the moonlight, watching the creek flow past, carrying away the last physical remnant of Martha's painful past. Life continued to be good to the Anders family. The ranch prospered, and Malcolm's reputation as a horseman grew. People came from as far as Sacramento to buy his horses, and he took pride in matching the right horse to the right owner. The children grew strong and healthy, each developing their own personality and interests. Daniel wanted to be a rancher like his father. Alina loved helping her mother in the garden and had a gift for growing things. James was the family daredevil, always climbing things he should not and jumping off things that were too high. Catherine was the reader, always with her nose in a book when her chores were done. In 1890, an unexpected letter arrived at the ranch. It was postmarked from Sacramento, and when Martha saw the handwriting on the envelope, her hands began to shake. It was from her sister, Emily. Martha sat down on the porch steps before opening it, her heart pounding. Malcolm sat down next to her, ready to offer support if needed. With trembling fingers, Martha broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The letter was long, several pages of careful handwriting. Emily wrote that she had recently gotten married and had been going through old family papers when she found all the letters Martha had sent over the years, unopened. Their mother had hidden them away, unable to face them. Emily had read every single one, and she was devastated by what their family had done to Martha. She wrote about how the truth had come out about Thomas after Martha left. Other women had come forward with stories of his abuse, his controlling behavior. The fire had been investigated, and it was ruled an accident. Thomas's family had tried to cover it up, but the truth had a way of coming out eventually. Emily wrote that their parents were getting older, that their mother was sick, and that she regretted terribly how they had treated Martha. She wanted to see her daughter again before she died. Emily ended the letter by saying that she wanted to meet Martha, to reconnect with her sister. She wanted to know about Martha's life, her family. She wanted to try to rebuild what had been broken. Martha finished reading and sat in silence for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she handed the letter to Malcolm to read. When he finished, he looked at her carefully. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to write back," Martha said slowly. "I want to tell Emily about you and the children and our life here. I want to give her a chance at least. But I am also afraid. What if it is too late? What if seeing my mother again just opens up old wounds?" "Then we will deal with it together," Malcolm said firmly. "If you want to respond to this letter, we will. If you want to go visit them, we will make it happen. And if it turns out to be too painful and you need to walk away again, I will support that too. Whatever you need, Martha. Whatever is best for you and our family." Martha wrote back to Emily that same day. She told her sister about Malcolm and their 4 children, about the ranch and their life in Chico. She told her about the burned photograph she had carried for so many years and how she had finally let it go. She wrote honestly about the pain their family's rejection had caused, but also about how she had healed and built a new life. She said she would like to visit, but only if everyone involved was truly ready for reconciliation. Emily's response came quickly, full of joy and relief. She included a letter from their mother, written in a shaky hand, apologizing for everything and begging Martha's forgiveness. Their father had passed away 2 years earlier, but he had, according to their mother, expressed regret over how they had treated Martha before he died. In June of 1890, Malcolm and Martha made the trip to Sacramento, bringing the children with them. It was a journey filled with nervousness and anticipation, but Malcolm stayed steady by Martha's side, holding her hand when she needed it, cracking jokes to ease the tension when things got too heavy. The reunion was emotional and complicated. Martha's mother wept when she saw her daughter again after so many years, apologizing over and over. Emily embraced Martha like she would never let go. They met Malcolm and the children, and Martha's mother marveled at her grandchildren, her face showing both joy and sadness for all the years she had missed. It was not perfect. There were difficult conversations and painful acknowledgments. But there was also forgiveness, slowly and carefully offered. Martha told her mother about that burned photograph, about how she had held onto it for years as her only connection to her family. She told her about the night of the fire, about Thomas's abuse, about everything she had been through. Her mother listened and cried and apologized again. "I should have believed you," she said. "I should have protected you. I failed you as a mother and I can never make that right. But I hope you can find it in your heart to give me a chance to know you and your beautiful family now." Martha looked at Malcolm, who gave her an encouraging nod, and then back at her mother. "I can try," she said. "I cannot promise it will be easy, and I cannot promise I can forget everything that happened, but I am willing to try for all of us." They stayed in Sacramento for a week, and by the time they left, a fragile but real connection had been re-established. Martha promised to write regularly and to bring the family for visits. Her mother promised to come to Chico when she was feeling stronger. Emily and Martha made plans to correspond frequently to make up for all the lost years. On the journey home, Martha was quiet but peaceful. She sat next to Malcolm on the wagon seat while the children dozed in the back, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For everything. For being there that first day in Chico. For not asking questions when I could not answer them. For loving me when I was still broken. For giving me a family and a home and a reason to keep going. for supporting me through all of this, even when it meant dealing with my messy past. Thank you for all of it, Malcolm. Malcolm kissed the top of her head. You do not have to thank me for loving you, Martha. It is the easiest thing I have ever done. The years continued to pass in a steady, happy rhythm. Martha's relationship with her mother and sister grew stronger through letters and occasional visits. Her mother passed away peacefully in 1893, with Martha at her bedside, holding her hand and telling her she was forgiven. Emily remained a constant presence in their lives, even moving to Chico in 1895 after her husband got a job managing a bank there. The Anders children grew up strong and capable. Daniel took over more and more of the ranch work as he got older, showing a natural talent for handling horses that even surpassed his father's. Eleanor married a young teacher in 1900 and settled nearby, giving Malcolm and Martha their first grandchild in 1901. James joined the cavalry, much to his mother's worry, but he wrote home regularly and seemed to thrive in the structured environment. Catherine became a schoolteacher, beloved by her students for her patience and creativity. In 1902, Malcolm and Martha celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children threw a big party at the ranch, inviting everyone from town and all the neighboring ranchers. There was music and dancing and so much food that the tables groaned under the weight of it all. As the sun began to set and the party was winding down, Malcolm took Martha's hand and led her away from the crowd, back to the spot by the creek where she had let go of that burned photograph all those years ago. "You remember standing here?" he asked. "Of course I do," Martha said, smiling up at him. "It was the night I finally let go of the past, the night I chose to fully embrace this life we built together." Malcolm pulled her close. "These 25 years with you have been the best years of my life. You have made me so happy, Martha. You have given me everything I ever wanted and so much more." "You saved me," Martha said, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. "That first day when you saw me at my absolute lowest point, you could have walked away. You could have demanded answers or judged me or turned me in to whatever authorities might have been looking for me. But you did not. You just offered me water and kindness and asked nothing in return. You taught me what real love looks like. You showed me that I was worthy of good things, of happiness, of a family. I love you so much, Malcolm Anders, more than I could ever possibly express." "Then do not try to express it," Malcolm said, grinning. "Just keep showing me every day like you have been doing for 25 years. That is more than enough for me." They kissed as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and gold. In the distance, they could hear the sound of their children laughing, their grandchild crying, the party continuing without them. But here, in this moment, it was just the two of them, like it had been from the very beginning. As the years rolled into the new century, Malcolm and Martha aged gracefully together. Their hair turned gray, their faces lined with wrinkles earned through years of laughter and hard work. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's management, with Malcolm gradually stepping back into an advisory role. More grandchildren arrived, filling the house with noise and chaos and immeasurable joy. Martha took up painting in her later years, creating beautiful landscapes of the California countryside she had come to love. She never painted that burned photograph from memory, never tried to recreate what had been lost. Instead, she painted what was in front of her: the ranch house in golden afternoon light, the horses running in the pasture, her grandchildren playing in the garden, Malcolm sitting on the porch with his pipe. Malcolm's back eventually gave him trouble from all those years of physical labor, and he slowed down considerably. But he never complained, just adjusted his routine and found new ways to be useful. He taught his grandchildren to whittle, passing on the skill his own father had taught him. He told them stories about the old days, about how their grandmother had come to Chico with nothing but a burned photograph and a broken heart, and how she had become the strongest, bravest woman he had ever known. In 1910, on a warm summer evening, Malcolm and Martha sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 60s now, but they still held hands like young lovers. Their oldest grandson, Eleanor's boy Thomas, was staying with them for the summer and had just gone inside to bed. "You think we have done well?" Martha asked suddenly. "With our lives, with our children, with everything." Malcolm turned to look at her, surprised by the question. "What brought that on?" "I do not know," Martha said thoughtfully. "I was just thinking about everything that happened, about how my life could have gone so differently. If I had not escaped Sacramento, if I had not ended up in Chico, if you had not been there that day to help me. Sometimes I think about that other version of my life, the one where I stayed with Thomas, or where his family caught up with me, and I ended up hanged for something I did not really do. And then I look at this life we built, and I can hardly believe it is real." "It is real," Malcolm said, squeezing her hand. "Every bit of it. And yes, I think we have done well. We raised 4 good children who have become fine adults. We built a successful ranch that will provide for our family for generations. We have been happy together, Martha. Truly happy. Not every moment has been easy, but we faced everything together, and we came out stronger for it. I would not change a single thing." Martha leaned her head on his shoulder. "I would not change anything either. Except maybe I would have found my way to Chico sooner, so I could have spent even more time with you." Malcolm laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "We have had plenty of time, and God willing, we will have plenty more." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one, listening to the sounds of the night settling over the ranch. The horses were quiet in the barn, the chickens roosting in their coop, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the moon. Life continued in this peaceful rhythm for several more years. Malcolm and Martha celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. They became great-grandparents multiple times over. The ranch expanded as Daniel bought adjoining property and increased the herd. Eleanor had 4 children in total, all of them regular visitors to the ranch. James retired from the cavalry in 1912 and settled in Chico with his wife, opening a saddle shop that quickly became successful. Catherine published a small book of poems in 1913, and Martha kept a copy of it on her bedside table, reading it over and over with pride. In the spring of 1915, Martha became ill. It started as a persistent cough that she brushed off as nothing serious, but it progressed quickly into pneumonia. Malcolm rarely left her side, sitting in a chair next to their bed, holding her hand and reading to her when she was awake, praying when she slept. All their children came home, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The house was full of family, just as Martha had always wanted. On a sunny afternoon in May, with Malcolm sitting next to her and her children gathered around, Martha passed away peacefully. Her last words were to Malcolm, "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. I will wait for you." Malcolm was devastated by her loss. They had been together for 38 years, partners in every sense of the word, and without her, the world felt wrong and off balance. But he had his family to care for and the ranch to think about, so he carried on as Martha would have wanted him to. He took to sitting on the porch every evening, in the same spot where they had sat together for so many years. He would talk to Martha as if she were still there, telling her about his day, about the grandchildren's accomplishments, about the things he noticed around the ranch. It brought him comfort, this one-sided conversation, and he never felt foolish doing it. In Martha's things, he found a letter addressed to him in her handwriting. She must have written it at some point when she knew she was getting sicker, preparing for the possibility that she might not recover. Malcolm sat down on their bed, his hands shaking, and opened it. "My dearest Malcolm," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am so sorry to have left you. I know how hard it will be, because if our positions were reversed, I do not know how I would go on without you. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to keep living, really living, not just going through the motions. Spend time with our children and grandchildren. Tell them stories about us, about how we met, about the life we built. Keep the ranch going strong. Sit on the porch in the evenings and watch the sunset. And Malcolm, I need you to know that you gave me everything. When I came to Chico all those years ago, I was broken and lost and convinced that I would never be whole again. You proved me wrong. You loved me without demanding explanations. You accepted me as I was, scars and all. You gave me a safe place to heal, a home to thrive in, and a family to love. That burned photograph I carried for so long, it represented everything I had lost. But you helped me see that loss does not have to be the end of the story. We built something new and beautiful together, something that was entirely ours. We created a legacy that will live on through our children and their children. I am not afraid of dying because I know I lived a good life. I know I was loved completely and that I loved completely in return. Not everyone gets that, Malcolm. We were lucky, you and me, so please keep going. Keep being the wonderful man I fell in love with. And know that wherever I am still loving you, still grateful for every single day we had together. Forever yours, Martha. Malcolm read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face, and then he carefully folded it and placed it in his shirt pocket, right over his heart. He took Martha's advice to heart. He spent his remaining years surrounded by family, sharing stories and wisdom, watching the ranch continue to grow and prosper. He taught his great-grandchildren the same lessons he had taught his children and grandchildren. The importance of kindness, of giving people grace, of loving without conditions. On a crisp February morning in 1920, 5 years after Martha's death, Malcolm woke up feeling peculiar. He got dressed slowly and made his way out to the porch, where Daniel found him an hour later, sitting peacefully in his chair with a slight smile on his face. He had passed away quietly, looking out over the ranch he and Martha had built together. At his funeral, the church was packed with family and friends, with people whose lives had been touched by Malcolm's kindness and integrity. Daniel spoke about his father's unwavering love for his mother, about how Malcolm had shown them all what it meant to be a good man, a good husband, a good father. Eleanor stood up and told the story of how her parents had met, the version she had heard countless times growing up. She told about the burned photograph her mother had carried, about how her father had never demanded explanations, had simply offered kindness when it was most needed. She talked about how their love had been the foundation of their entire family, how everything good in their lives had grown from that initial meeting in Chico all those years ago. Malcolm and Martha were buried side by side in the Chico cemetery, under a large oak tree. Their shared headstone read, Malcolm Anders, 1850–1920, and Martha Anders, 1852–1915. Beloved parents and grandparents, forever together. The ranch stayed in the family for generations. Daniel ran it until he was too old, then passed it to his son, who passed it to his. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but certain things remained the same. The porch where Malcolm and Martha had sat together every evening was preserved exactly as it had been. The little creek where Martha had released that burned photograph still ran clear and cold through the property. Family stories were passed down through the generations, becoming part of the family lore. Great-great-grandchildren who never met Malcolm and Martha still knew their story, still understood that the family's foundation had been built on kindness, acceptance, and unconditional love. The burned photograph itself was long gone, dissolved in the creek waters decades earlier. But its legacy remained. It had taught Martha about the impermanence of things, about the importance of letting go, about how carrying pain only weighs you down. And Malcolm's acceptance of that photograph, his willingness to let Martha keep her secrets until she was ready to share them, had taught generations about the power of patience and non-judgmental love. Years turned into decades, and Chico grew and changed. The dirt streets were paved, cars replaced horses, electricity lit up the night. But the Anders Ranch remained, a constant presence on the edge of town, a reminder of the people who had built it and the love story that had started it all. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting and painting the sky in brilliant colors, people swore they could see two figures sitting on that old porch, hands intertwined, watching the day fade into night. It was just a trick of the light, of course, shadows and memories combining into something that looked almost real, but whether it was real or not did not really matter. What mattered was the story, the legacy, the lesson that Malcolm and Martha Anders had left behind. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to ask no questions. That love is not about demanding all the answers, but about accepting people exactly as they are. That healing takes time, and patience is its own form of love. That from the ashes of tragedy, something beautiful can grow if you give it the chance. Their great-great-great-grandchildren still lived on the ranch in the 1970s, still told the story of how it all began. They would gather the youngest children on the porch and tell them about their ancestor Martha, who had come to Chico with nothing but a burned photograph and a broken heart. They would tell them about Malcolm, who had seen her at her lowest point and had offered help without judgment. They would tell them about the life those two people had built together, about the love that had sustained them through decades, about how that love had created all of this: the ranch, the family, the legacy. And the children would listen with wide eyes, understanding in some fundamental way that this story was important, that it said something essential about who they were and where they came from. They would learn, as generations before them had learned, that everyone carries burdens and kindness costs nothing. They would learn that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to see someone's pain and choose not to add to it. They would learn that love is not about perfection, but about acceptance and patience and showing up, day after day, even when things are hard. The Anders family legacy lived on, rooted in that first moment of kindness between a broken woman and a cowboy who asked no questions. It lived on in the ranch that still stood strong, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried Malcolm and Martha's values forward into new generations. It lived on in the stories told on warm summer evenings, in the way family members treated each other and strangers, in the understanding that everyone deserves grace and second chances. Malcolm and Martha Anders had been ordinary people living ordinary lives in a small California town. They had faced hardships and loss, had made mistakes and struggled and sometimes failed. But they had also loved each other fiercely and completely, had built something lasting and beautiful together, had left the world better than they found it. And really, in the end, what more could anyone hope to accomplish? What greater legacy could anyone leave behind than love and family, and the knowledge that they had made a difference in the lives of those around them? The sun continued to set over the Anders Ranch, painting the sky in brilliant colors, just as it had for over a century. The creek still ran clear and cold, flowing past the spot where Martha had released her burned photograph all those years ago. The house still stood strong, weathered but sturdy, filled with the echoes of laughter and love. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Malcolm and Martha Anders were together still, holding hands and watching over the legacy they had created, proud of what they had built and grateful for every single day they had been given together. The story that had started with a burned photograph and a cowboy who asked no questions had become something bigger than either of them could have imagined. It had become a foundation, a family legend, a reminder of what really matters in life. It had become, quite simply, a love story for the ages. And that love story continued, even now, in every child born into the Anders family, in every act of kindness performed by their descendants, in every moment when someone chose acceptance over judgment, patience over demands, love over fear. Malcolm and Martha's story lived on, as real and powerful and transformative as it had been that first day in 1876, when a cowboy saw a woman clutching a burned photograph and decided to help her without asking why. That was how love stories should be, they would say years later. Not perfect, not easy, but real and lasting and built on a foundation of kindness and acceptance. That was the legacy Malcolm and Martha Anders had left behind, and it was a legacy worth cherishing, worth protecting, worth passing down through the generations. And so the story ended where all the best stories end, with love triumphant, with family thriving, with the certainty that some things, the important things, never truly end at all. They just transform, evolving and growing and continuing on in new forms, but always rooted in that original foundation of love and acceptance and grace. Malcolm and Martha Anders had found each other in the Wild West of 1876, in a dusty California town when one of them was broken and the other was kind. They had built a life together that spanned nearly 4 decades, had created a family that continued for generations, had left behind a legacy of love that would never be forgotten. And if that was not a happy ending, then happy endings did not exist at all.